For 28 years, my father never called me his son. Not once. Instead, he had a different name for me. A name he used at family dinners, at birthdays, even in front of relatives. He called me the affair child. According to him, I wasn't really his. He believed my mom had cheated on him and that I was the proof. And the worst part? Everyone in the family believed him. My uncles whispered about it. My cousins made jokes about it. Even strangers sometimes looked at me like I didn't belong in my own family. Growing up, I spent my entire life trying to prove something I didn't even understand. I tried to look like him, act like him, earn his approval. But nothing ever changed his mind. For 28 years, he was completely convinced that I wasn't his son. Until one small decision changed everything. A simple DNA test. Just a cotton swab, a sealed envelope, and a few weeks of waiting. But when the results finally came back, the truth inside that report didn't just prove my father wrong. It exposed a secret that shocked my entire family. Because the man who spent decades calling me the affair child had absolutely no idea what the DNA test was about to reveal. The accusation started before I was even old enough to understand what it meant. According to my dad, the story was simple. My mom had cheated on him, and I was the result of that mistake. There was never any proof. No messages, no witnesses, no moment where my mom confessed to anything. But in my dad's mind, he had already decided the truth. He said the timeline didn't make sense. When my mom told him she was pregnant with me, he claimed the dates didn't add up the way they should have. Instead of quietly talking it through with her, he turned that doubt into a permanent belief. And once my dad believed something, he never let it go. At first, my mom tried to defend herself. I heard pieces of those arguments growing up, late-night conversations behind closed doors, voices raised in frustration, the sound of my mom crying in the kitchen when she thought everyone else was asleep. She told him over and over that she had never cheated, that I was his child. But after years of repeating the same argument, something inside her seemed to break. Eventually, she stopped trying to convince him. Not because she was guilty, but because she realized he had already made up his mind. And the worst part was how openly he talked about it. Most people would keep something like that private. Not my dad. He turned it into a running joke. At family dinners, he'd casually say things like, "Well, maybe one day we'll meet his real father." Relatives would laugh awkwardly, unsure how to react. Some thought he was kidding. Others weren't so sure. But every time he said it, my mom's face would tighten just a little. And I would sit there pretending not to notice. When I was younger, I didn't understand what affair child meant. I just knew it sounded different from the way my dad talked about my older sister. She was my daughter. I was your son. Even the way he introduced us to people made the difference obvious. "This is my daughter, Emily," he'd say proudly. Then he'd gesture toward me. "And this is, well, you know." People would exchange uncomfortable looks, but no one ever challenged him. Over time, the label stuck. Some relatives started repeating it when they thought I couldn't hear. Kids at family gatherings would whisper and ask questions. "Is it true your dad isn't really your dad?" At first, I tried to ignore it. But the older I got, the harder it became. Because when the person spreading the rumor is your own father, it stops feeling like a rumor. It starts feeling like the truth. And after hearing it for nearly 3 decades, even I began to wonder if maybe he was right. Growing up with that label changed the way I saw myself. Kids don't need to hear something 100 times for it to sink in. When the same message repeats for years, it slowly becomes part of how you think. By the time I was in middle school, I had already started noticing the difference between how my dad treated my sister and how he treated me. When she got good grades, he bragged about it to everyone. "That's my girl," he'd say proudly. But when I brought home a report card with straight A's, he barely looked up. "Good for you," he'd mumble before changing the subject. School events were even worse. Whenever there was a parent-teacher meeting, a sports game, or a school play, my mom always showed up. My dad rarely did. And when people asked why, he sometimes made jokes that weren't really jokes. "Maybe his real father is busy tonight," he once said to one of my coaches. The room went quiet after that. But moments like that didn't stay in the room. Kids talk. Rumors spread faster than adults realize. By the time I reached high school, some classmates already believed the story. Some thought I was adopted. Others believed my parents had some kind of secret family drama. And honestly, I didn't know what to believe anymore. Every time I looked in the mirror, I searched for something, anything, that looked like my dad. His eyes, his smile, his jawline. Some small proof that I belonged. But my father had already decided that I didn't. And after hearing it for so many years, a part of me started wondering if maybe he was right. By the time I turned 18, the distance between my dad and me felt permanent. We still lived in the same house, ate at the same table, and passed each other in the hallway almost every day. But emotionally, we were miles apart. Most conversations between us were short and awkward. If I asked him a question, he answered with one word. If I tried to tell him something about school or work, he usually nodded without really listening. It was like he had already decided I wasn't really part of his life. The difference between how he treated me and my sister became even clearer as we got older. When my sister graduated high school, my dad threw her a huge celebration. He proudly told everyone about the college she was attending and how excited he was to help pay for it. "This girl has a bright future," he said, raising his glass at the party. Everyone cheered. I stood in the corner quietly, clapping along with everyone else. A year later, when I started talking about college, the conversation went very differently. I mentioned a few schools I was interested in applying to and asked if he could help me understand the financial side of things. My dad barely looked up from his phone. "Maybe your real father can help with that," he said casually. The words hit harder than he probably realized. My mom immediately told him that wasn't funny, but he just shrugged like it was no big deal. After that, I stopped asking him for anything. Not advice. Not support. Not even basic conversations. By then, I had already learned something important. When someone spends your entire life reminding you that you don't belong, eventually, you stop trying to convince them otherwise. For years, the accusation just hung in the air like something everyone knew but no one wanted to deal with. Family gatherings continued. Holidays came and went. My dad still made the occasional comment, and everyone else just pretended not to hear it. It had been 28 years of the same story. Then one summer afternoon, everything finally reached a breaking point. We were at my aunt's house for a barbecue. The backyard was full of relatives, kids running around, music playing, people laughing. For a moment, it almost felt like a normal family gathering. Until my cousin Jake brought it up. Jake had always been the kind of person who said things others avoided. After a couple of drinks, he looked around the table and shook his head. "You know what's crazy," he said. Everyone looked at him. "This whole a fair child thing has been going on for almost 30 years. The table went quiet. Jake leaned back in his chair and shrugged. "You guys know there's a really easy way to end this argument, right?" My dad frowned. "What are you talking about?" Jake pointed toward me. "A DNA test." For a second, nobody said anything. My dad laughed like the idea was ridiculous. "Why would I waste money on that?" he said. But Jake didn't back down. "Well," he replied calmly, "if you're so sure he's not yours, wouldn't you want proof?" That comment hung in the air. For the first time in years, my dad didn't immediately respond. I looked at my mom. She looked nervous, but also hopeful. Like maybe this was the moment she had been waiting for. 2 weeks later, a small box arrived in the mail. Inside was a DNA test kit. Just a plastic tube, a cotton swab, and a set of instructions. It looked so simple. Almost too simple for something that could settle a question that had followed me my entire life. When I handed the kit to my dad, he rolled his eyes. "This is pointless," he muttered. But he took the swab anyway. We mailed the samples that same day. Then all we could do was wait. 3 weeks later, the results arrived in a sealed envelope. And inside that envelope was the truth my father had avoided for 28 years. The email with the DNA results arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I remember staring at my phone for a long time before opening it. 28 years of doubt were sitting behind one single click. My mom was in the kitchen when I walked in with the laptop. My dad was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone like nothing important was about to happen. "You got the results?" he asked casually. I nodded. For the first time, he actually looked interested. "Go ahead," he said. "Let's see what the test says." His tone sounded confident. Almost smug. Like he expected the results to prove everything he had believed for nearly 3 decades. I slowly opened the report. The screen loaded a long document filled with percentages and charts. Then my eyes landed on the line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Not because I was surprised, But because after hearing the accusation my entire life, seeing the truth written so clearly felt almost unreal. I turned the laptop toward my dad. He leaned forward, reading the line carefully. His expression changed almost immediately. The confidence disappeared. His eyebrows tightened, and he leaned closer to the screen like maybe he had misunderstood something. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered. But the numbers didn't change. There was no doubt. No confusion. No room for argument. The test confirmed exactly what my mom had been saying for 28 years. I was his son. There had never been an affair. There had never been another man. The entire accusation had been built on nothing but suspicion. My mom didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just sat there quietly, looking at him with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger. Not relief. Just exhaustion. Because after defending herself for nearly 3 decades, the truth had finally spoken for her. And for the first time in my life, my father had absolutely nothing left to say. The kitchen stayed silent for what felt like forever. My dad kept staring at the screen like if he looked long enough, the numbers might somehow change. But they didn't. 99.99%. There was no misunderstanding. No loophole. No way to twist the result. For 28 years, he had been completely wrong. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. "Well," he muttered quietly, "I guess the test says what it says." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a simple sentence, like the last 3 decades were some kind of minor misunderstanding. My mom looked at him in disbelief. "You guess?" she said softly. Her voice wasn't angry. If anything, it sounded tired. Tired of being accused, tired of defending myself, tired of hearing the same lie over and over again. My dad didn't respond. He just stared at the table. And for the first time in my life, the room felt different. Because the truth had finally broken the story he had been telling for years. Suddenly, the whispers from relatives didn't make sense anymore. The jokes didn't work anymore. The label he had used my entire life, the affair child, was gone. And everyone in that room realized something important. The problem had never been me. The problem had been a lie that my father chose to believe. For 28 years. A few days after the results came back, my dad tried calling me. For the first time in my life, he didn't use that label. No affair child. No sarcastic jokes. Just my real name. I stared at the phone ringing in my hand for a moment before answering. When I finally picked up, he was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said something I had waited my entire life to hear. "I guess I owe you an apology." I didn't respond right away. Because after 28 years of doubt, whispers, and accusations, one apology couldn't erase everything. But at least now the truth was finally clear. I was never the affair child. I was simply the son he spent 28 years refusing to believe in. And now he had to live with that truth.